Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
Hi, I'm Susan, and I'm a college counselor and have read applications for a small liberal arts college and 2 research universities. My twins are recent college graduates.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of 2 daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. This week in the news, we'll have a question from a listener who wants to know, how should I select an independent college counselor? And Lisa will join me to answer that question. We'll have part 2 of 4 of my interview about every FAQ I could think of about 529 plans. And that interview is with Julia Shields-Rutyna and Jonathan Hughes. And then we'll have another question from a listener because you guys are sending them in. Susan will join me to answer a question from a listener in suburban Philly who wants to know, is it ever a bad idea to submit a test score because your test score is too high for that institution?
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
Hey, Lisa.
Hey, Mark, how are you?
Well, I'm okay. I'm surviving,
Surviving is good. Better
Surviving
than the
is good.
alternative, right?
Yeah. So I think this is our first recording in 2025.
I think you're right.
You've been doing a lot of Lynda. It's been the Lynda Lisa show over there a little bit.
That's true, but it's good to be back with you, Mark.
Thank you. Yeah, you did a great segment, Susan, too. So listen, I wanted to ask you, because I know you're right there in the Research Triangle, and I know you're pretty plugged in to sort of what's happening in local college admissions. Anything happening with local schools that our listeners might find interesting?
Well, I think the interesting piece here is that at UNC Chapel Hill, they're enlarging the size of the school. So they actually had more slots for freshmen this year. And I think the consensus is that more kids are getting in. It's been a little bit easier to admit. And then on the other hand, North Carolina State has been a harder admit with lots and lots and lots and lots of deferrals, even like very, very strong kids. And it's obviously their first choice. So we don't really know what to make of that.
Do you think it has anything to do with major at all? I mean, I know.
Oh, yeah, it definitely does, because NC State, like there are some really competitive majors and you cannot dismiss the importance of that. So, but there's a lot of kids who want to go into business or engineering.
Sure. Those are some of their tougher majors.
And so they're really hard to get into.
You're going to say something about Duke, I think.
Oh, Duke is this, it's...
Duke is Duke.
It's just Duke, right? It's, who knows what they're going to do, when or why, but it's, it's not exactly easy to get in there. I'll put it to you that way.
Well, the thing about a school like Duke is, first of all, they're trying to have 50 states and as many countries. And just between faculty, kids, and alumni living in the area, that's already going to produce such a robust applicant pool with hooked applicants that being unhooked and being local is just really tough. Unless they have a commitment to their backyard. Like like Chicago does some special things for Chicago kids. Philly does that. Some of the Boston schools they tend to do it for local publics, not privates. I don't know if Duke does that, if they have any special.
I haven't heard that, but that doesn't to say that, they don't. And there are a lot of faculty kids too. I think that's
Sure.
another piece
Of course.
that you're competing against. But yeah, I don't know if I ever told you this story, but my kids' school, they had the head of admissions of Duke on for a parent session, and he was talking about institutional priorities and how that we would all never know what they were going to do or why. And you'll never know why you got in or why you didn't. And that they don't disclose those institutional priorities to anyone. And one of the college counselors from our school is like, yeah, but you'll tell us, right? You tell us three, we're close. And he's like, well, I can give the appearance of telling you three. And okay, we are never knowing. So
So I'm curious. Are you talking about Christoph or
yeah,
somebody else?
Christoph,
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Because he did on my interview with him, he did reveal. I asked him that question, and he did say there's a more of a explicit commitment for more socioeconomic diversity, more first gen, more rural, and there's that commitment to that. So I find that's the best that you can ever ask for, is that schools will tell you like one or two. And when I was in admissions, I really prided myself on being transparent. Sometimes I got in trouble with my boss for being too transparent. I got smacked in the face a couple times. But even so, there's some things I couldn't share, because if Duke indicates that, we have this undersubscribed major and we might have to lay some faculty off because we're only getting 4 to 6 kids in this class, unless we get more interest here, then they're going to have people lining up to pretend they're interested in that major.
Right. Yeah, of course. Of course. Yeah.
So there's some things you really can't do, because people will just try to don't just try to game the system.
Yeah.
Or if it's a school that's trying to get more full pay, not that Duke would have this problem, but trying to get more full pay families or more people that have donor potential. How does that sound to say that in front of a group of people that need financial aid? Like, they'll get out and walk out on you. So I
Absolutely.
get it that schools can't say all of them. I'm happy if they'll give us at least one.
Right.
You know,
No, right. Yeah,
yeah,
it is their prerogative, of course. And they're Duke, they can do whatever they want. I mean, he's always said, like, I can fill my class with, if I want to fill my class with nothing but left-handed tuba players, I can do that. If I want to do this, I can do it.
yeah,
I can do whatever I want. So,
yeah.
because they have
Pretty
so
much
many
true.
qualified applicants. But yeah, the other things I would say is just Elon continues to defer a lot of kids, I think, as a yield protection. And then now High Point seems like they've started doing that too, which is a little
Yeah.
bit of a surprise this year. People weren't expecting that. So those are the other two things that I've heard.
Literally today, I had a Zoom call with Kurt Ramsey, who's the chief enrollment officer at High Point. I'm always curious when a school blows up. What are the reasons? So you can look to hear that spotlight later this spring about why is High Point blowing up with their applications.
So let me ask you this, because you and I both visited Meredith, and we liked it a lot.
Hmm.
Obviously, there's only a small percentage of people that will look at women's colleges. Do you hear anything at all about Meredith?
Never,
Yeah,
never. And it's a
yeah,
shame because it's a really, I think, unique place,
yeah.
incredibly supportive.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like they have a lot of great resources, and the relationship with North Carolina State is also really interesting, I think. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that is like one of those like gems that is hidden from sight, but definitely has value.
Yeah, and I have a particular fondness because my niece had such a great experience there.
Yeah.
My first cousin. I say niece, it was actually my first cousin. But yeah, it's interesting. Now I know in the Black community, North Carolina Central is a highly reputable school, and I've had a lot of students that have been very pleased with their experiences there. But I know majority of students aren't usually looking at HBCUs, but same for women's colleges. They
Right.
tend to be more niche. Yeah. Georgia went through the exact same thing that UNC is going through, and it was the same thing. I think, isn't UNC adding 600?
Hmm.
Is it?
I think
Are they
it's
doing it over
500.
3 years?
I think
500?
it's like there's going to be like 5,000 more kids. Don't quote me on that. I have to go back and read
Okay,
the article. But it's like a few thousand more kids over
that's a
the next
lot.
few years. So they're really enlarging the school.
Friends, after Lisa and I recorded this, I did some research and Lisa was right. Of course, right? We all know that. But they are adding 5,000 students over 10 years. UNC used to enroll 5% of every student that graduated from a North Carolina high school who went to college from the state of North Carolina. But because North Carolina is one of the fastest growing states, they now only enroll 3.5% of graduates from the state who go off to college after finishing high school. So the intent of this class expansion is to get those numbers close to where they used to be. For those of you who are out-of-staters, who are getting giddy with excitement right now, Unfortunately, almost all of the additional 500 per class will go to in-state students. I've said this before on the podcast, but it bears repeating. UNC Chapel Hill denies, not waitlists, not defers, not admits more than 90% of their out-of-state applicants. That is more than any other school in the country, not just public, private, or public. So yes, they deny more than Stanford, Brown, MIT, Yale, Harvard, Columbia, Duke, Pomona, you name your school. So if you're an out-of-state applicant to UNC, maybe you'll be one of the 17 they admit, but guard your heart. UNC started the extra 500 per class with this year's class, the class of 2025. If you really want to read a good article on this, I recommend an article by Maury Dean that appeared in the Raleigh News and Observer on January 24th entitled, More First-Year Students Can Enroll at UNC Chapel Hill, starting with this fall's class for their expansion.
Georgia did 600 over 3 years, like 200 more a class for 3 years. And I noticed it. I noticed kids are getting in that wouldn't have got in before. And Yale did something almost those exact same numbers over a roll up. And I noticed it a little bit there. They're still Yale. He's still got to walk on water. But yeah, no, that's good little inside scoops there. So I might keep calling on you for the, inside the beltway, inside the research triangle,
All right. Well, I'll
feet
keep
on the
my
street.
ear to the ground,
Yeah.
Our regional group is having a meeting on Friday and then another one a couple weeks later. So I'm sure I'll get even more done at those two meetings.
And what about other like UNCs? I mean, I know Charlotte's been getting more selective.
Yeah,
Wilmington's getting more selective.
Wilmington.
What about Asheville and the impact of the
Yeah, see, I feel like a lot of people
hurricane
aren't applying to Asheville this year. Like a lot of
because of the
people that it
hurricane?
normally would have had because of the hurricane. It's almost like
Yeah.
I feel like I don't want to bother them, and I think that UNC Asheville's like, no, please bother us.
Bother us.
Bother us, definitely bother us. But I think the general consensus is that most of even like East Carolina, like it's tightening, as they become more popular, their admission standards rise. So
I never get a lot about Greensboro. I don't hear a lot about UNCG.
yeah.
Do you where you're at?
But,
Like I hear more about
do hear-
W and UNCC other than
I'm
even
starting to
Asheville.
hear more people just locally talking about it. But a lot of times, like it's known for music. And so a lot of times if a kid is really interested in any kind of music, that's a top choice on their list. But I do think it is, I know they've had some financial problems, but I do hear about it more from clients and just like people in the community than I did a couple years ago.
Well, that's good. You know what? I'll have to schedule a follow-up conversation with you about UNCW because I visited last month and I went back and listened to your podcast and you said most of the things that I was going to say, but there were some things I got a chance to sit down with admissions for an hour and got some real interesting insights on how they read a file. So maybe we can schedule something where the two of us just talk about it. Yeah. So let's do that. Yeah. All right. Well, enough of our chit chat. Our listeners probably thinking you guys can have this side hustle on your own. Get to the meat.
Well, the meat today comes from Lisa from New Hampshire.
Yeah. So obviously I had to tap Lisa. When someone named Lisa sends a question in, I say, which co-host is going to answer this one? Oh, this is easy.
Right.
So we're going to play this question from Lisa, and then I'm going to ask Lisa to chime in with her wisdom.
Hi, Mark. This is Lisa. I'm a mom from New Hampshire. Thank you so much to the entire YCBK team. Your message about college being a match to be made has resonated with our family and reshaped my kids' approach to potential colleges to put on their lists. Now we'd appreciate your advice on finding a match with a college counselor to guide their application processes, from understanding where they fit in the school's applicant pool to creating a compelling application. Should we try to find a counselor with a large volume of students applying to my kids' top choice schools so they'll have experience with prior acceptances and denials? Or a counselor with a focus on students applying to schools in that region, for example, in the South or the West Coast? Should they look for a counselor who was an admissions officer at their first choice school? How much does volume and experience with specific universities matter? Thank you so much.
Take it away, Lisa.
Wow, this is a really a doozy of a question. This is because it's kind of there are so many different factors that would go into it. So my first response was like, I know of some really good college counselors at School Match for You, but I know that's not what she was asking about. So how do you find the right college counselor for you? I think there's like some general principles that I would look at first.
Hmm.
And one of them is I would kind of like to check and see, are they a member of any kind of professional organization? So like IECA, HECA, NACAC, SACAC, anything like that kind of it just sort of shows that that person is really kind of involved in the the community, the higher education community, and might have some more credentials. So that is the first thing that I would look at. And then the second thing that I think that I would look at just in general is what if this is a YCBK listener who's really interested in fit and match, to really try to find counselors who emphasize fit and match in their marketing materials and in their spiel, because not all counselors do. Some are more focused on status, and that is their calling card. But to really have someone talk to you about that and talk to you about how they work to do that, what kinds of things do they do to try to get to know the student, and so those are some like basic guiding principles. The other thing is just like if you have any special needs, like let's say you are interested in music, auditioning, or theater, or an athletic recruit, or you have a kid who has special needs or is like maybe in a very niche major, you might look for people who specialize in those kind of things as well.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said. This was a great question. Thank you, Lisa from New Hampshire. It actually made me put my hat on and think, oh, well, if I was to hire an IC, what would I look for? And I came up with three main things. So knowledge is one of them, definitely, because you're paying someone for their expertise. So I think all of the things that Lisa said are legit. Like, I would want to know what is your experience with the schools that we're interested in. That is important. I would want to know what your experience is in the region. And if there was someone who had done admissions at the schools you were interested, that would be a plus factor. Now, I do want to say this. You have to be careful, though, that someone that's done admissions at the place did it pretty recently.
Right.
Like
Things
I had
change.
oh my goodness, I had someone, I can say this because nobody will know who it is. I can even say the college. So I had someone from Hamilton College that had wanted to hire me, who had done admissions at Hamilton College, like quite some time ago. That's discreet enough. Nobody would know. Lots of people did it there, right? And so their student was interested in like the most selective schools in the country. And some of the advice that I'd given them was that you're going to need to be test optional because they had a 1410 on the SAT. And they could not believe that a 1410 was not a score that they could submit to any school in the country. And I knew right away, wow, you might have done admissions, but you haven't been in touch with admissions recently.
Right.
So that leads to another thing. Is this someone who's always learning and
Right.
constantly growing? I know, like, I used to, back in the day, have the mindset that I would only hire someone if they had admissions experience. And I actually made an offer to, I'm naming all kinds of schools today, but nobody will know who they are, from someone who used to be at University of Richmond. And then as it went through the process, like, I started seeing other things that showed that that person wasn't going to be a good fit. And that's only one piece. I'll say in full disclosure, Lisa was actually the person who convinced me that you don't have to hire someone that has admissions experience, and getting to know her and all the different skills and traits that she had. You actually changed my mind
Aw.
from saying I will only, no, it's true. I'm not saying stuff that's not true. You changed my mind from thinking you have to have someone that has admissions experience. But I do think if someone has admissions experience at a specific school that you're interested in, that's definitely a positive. I did a presentation maybe about 9 months ago to a family in Southern California, San Diego, actually, I can say that. And I thought for sure I was going to get it. Like, I thought they were going to, hire me and move forward. I was kind of surprised they did it. And when I followed up, they said, well, our son wants to go to MIT, and we found somebody else that had done admissions at MIT. And so, you know what, that did make sense to me. So I think that is a plus. But that's only one type of knowledge. There's other
Right.
knowledge, and you brought
Yeah.
up some of the other types of knowledge that are important, like knowledge of your area of interest, right? So knowledge of special needs. So Lisa has specialized knowledge with, ADD, ADHD, dysgraphia, dyslexia, all those kinds of things. And so a lot of times somebody might be right in Atlanta with our company and they'll be like, I want to work with Lisa because of your background. Or with your background as a psychologist, you've got that emotional specialization that people may be drawn to. That's a different type of knowledge that's valuable. Lynda on our team knows computer science better than any of the rest of us.
Knowledge of your local school context is another type of knowledge. Friends, most of the time when I present our services for company I started, School Match for You, to a prospective family, and if they decide to go elsewhere, they normally will say we've decided to go with someone local. Now, when they ask this question, I'll oftentimes push back and say, hey, if I have access to your school's profile and data like score data, Naviance data, Zello, whatever, service you're using, and historical placement data, I've got everything I really need. But sometimes the family's just more at peace with someone local. And sometimes the family says, my student doesn't really like Zoom meetings, and I want to be able to meet in person. And that's fine. That could line up with being more of a philosophical match for you and your family. Or maybe their local knowledge is very meaningful to you. I always tell people to go with what you're most at peace with, just like selecting a college. Go where you're most at peace with.
So, like, that knowledge of who your kid is and what they're interested in is important. Knowledge of the area, knowledge of the schools, knowledge of the region, that is really important. And I don't want to pretend that it's not. And if I was hiring somebody, I would ask them some tough questions about that. So I think that's fair. The second thing, and you brought this up, which is really important, which is philosophically aligned.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's very important that there's like a values match. And so, Lisa brought that up, like our whole approach is fit and match. And so I certainly have families that I work with, and you do too, Lisa, where like prestige is the only thing that matters. It's a little uncomfortable. Like, I'm not saying they're not happy, but we're not always necessarily the best match, because I know sometimes I'm frustrated. Like, I'll get really, really excited about a school that lines up with everything that they tell me they're looking for. And if I hear an answer like, my kids' peers aren't going to be impressed with that, so it's a non-starter, like, I'm kind of frustrated, because our whole approach is fit and match. Other people's approach is, we're going to get you to go Ivy. And so that's really important that you get that philosophical alignment. Honesty is also important too, because there are people that sort of oversell things in terms of how they represent themselves. There's also people that take advantage of the fact that people will do almost anything for their kid and pay almost any amount. So they have the mindset that if I charge more, you'll think I'm better. And actually, to tell you the truth, a lot of times they can pull that off. But I would call that a values issue if that's not aligned with how you think. So I think the philosophical alignment is really, really important. And then the last thing that I feel is really important is chemistry.
Yeah, I was going to say that too. Like, that relationship is so important, of trust.
Extremely important. Extremely important. And I would say chemistry with both the family and the kid. Because, most of the time you're going to be working with all three, actually. If it's two-parent family or whether it's one-parent, two-parent, you're going to be working with everybody. So just like we tell people when you set foot on a campus, it should feel right. That's how it should feel with a counselor. And you should feel like this is somebody who I can trust. This is somebody, and trust is a lot of things. Like, trust is I can confide in you. Trust is you won't betray confidentiality. Trust is I feel like you'll have wisdom. Like, trust is a lot of different things. And it should be for the student and for the parent. There should be a comfort level there. And so those are just the three things that came to mind for me, were knowledge of like whatever your situation is, philosophy, and chemistry. That it factor kind of has to, and I would recommend that before you hire somebody, that your student meets, with them and you meet with them.
Yeah, I always want to meet with this kid because I don't
Yeah.
want to have a kid who doesn't like me and have to work
Yeah.
with them for 15 months. That's no fun, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I literally said in a conversation very recently, like, I don't want to feel like I'm a dentist trying to pull your tooth out and you're bucking me, you know?
hmm hmm
So that piece is really important. And, a lot of times, like, if I do a presentation, and I'm thinking of one that I did very recently, and I could tell, like, both the parents, I could just tell that they were like really ready to move forward.
hmm
And then they said, we'd like to talk to our student after and kind of see how he feels, because he's going to be the one that's interacting with you a lot. And I was like, I like this family. Like, they get it. So those are the things that came to mind for me. Anything else you want to add, Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, what I would say is like having that admissions, like working in that admissions office, that knowledge is good. There are different skill sets though. And that's it's a different skill set from evaluation to being a consultant and shaping an application. And so you can't assume that just because somebody just worked at X school that they know how to do that. That's where you really need to do your job interviewing that person. Because I think that's an art. And there are, as much as regional knowledge is important, there's like a lot of the aspects of a college application that is successful are going to be the same no matter what region it goes to, right? So, like having a good list, having good essays, really good essays. And, I think a lot of times what I find with essays is it's really the relationship between the consultant and the student that allows the kid to feel safe enough to go out on a limb and write really awesome essays. And that in itself is kind of an art. So you really that relationship and that connection is so important.
Yeah, I think one thing that helps you, because I've told you this from the past. You're very good with essays. That was one of the things I wanted to hire you. But like sometimes there are transferable skills,
hmm
and so you've been a psychologist for over a quarter of a century, and like you're. I'm not trying to make you feel old. Lisa
Uh,
didn't take that as a compliment. You should have seen the look on her
I
face when I
already
said
felt
that.
old before you said that. It's true
Okay.
though. It's true.
Yeah,
Yes.
but like you're good at like delving into someone
hmm
and getting them to spill what's inside and put
hmm
stuff on paper. Because I remember like when I first started working with Lisa, I was like, how did you get to know this stuff so quick when you're like relatively young in the counseling field? But that's an example of sort of taking a transferable skill of bringing out what's in somebody or having them do writing exercises, and so that is something that people can look for. I do find knowledge of admissions I mean, having done admissions, I still consider it a
Yeah,
plus, but
it's useful. Absolutely.
yeah, it is to know how committees work and all that stuff. But one thing I will say, there can be a danger, and I actually was talking to a former college admission officer about this week. There sometimes can be a danger with an admission officer that only knows one school of not really understanding the world outside of that school. That can be a danger. Like there's value to knowing the process and knowing like different things, shaping the class and all those different things. But sometimes, like even like for me as somebody who interviews people here on the podcast, like I can see a difference if I interview someone that's been at multiple schools
Of course. Yes.
versus if they've only been at one school.
hmm
I really can. Like because when they've only been at one school, sometimes what they think is normal is just like you can get ensconced in your own bubble sometimes and not know like the world outside of that. You always have to be learning. I can even use myself as an example. Like when I did admissions, it was like holistic, committee, wasn't like this stuff admit by school, admit by major. It was none of that stuff. So all that stuff was foreign to me. I had to like learn that more from the outside, not from the inside. Like applying by major, that's a whole different world. So that's why I like that continuous learner piece. And I wouldn't be afraid to ask somebody different things, like, ask them tougher questions. Like people shouldn't be offended by that. People shouldn't be afraid to ask, can I talk to someone you've worked with? Or different things like that. So it's an important decision.
Yeah. Yeah, and just, and I'm sure Lisa from New Hampshire already knows this, but if a college counseling service is offering you certainty, there is no certainty in college admissions. So if they're saying like we can get you into your top two schools, no question, I would be suspicious of that because there's, to reference our earlier discussion about Duke, so many different factors going on at any given time.
That's one of my pet peeves. Some companies market themselves like X number of percentage of people, like really high, like 95% get in their top two schools. And what they're doing, like the way somebody hears that is, so if I want to go to Harvard or Yale, I have a 95% chance. And what they're doing is saying, oh, no, you're not appropriate for that. Let's rebuild your list to something that, that is appropriate. And now you got into one of your top, but that's not how people hear it.
Right.
I think you have to be careful about some of the over-promising that's out there. Some of the complaints I've heard are counseling where they're trying to act like your seventh grader needs to do all this crazy stuff starting now to position themselves. Let the kid be a kid. I'm not a fan of that. I'm really not. And I'm also not a fan of, I don't care if you're interested in German, start early enough with us and we're going to make you look like a German major.
Right.
Because that's an easier path.
Mm-hmm.
Or we've got a pathway to move to Montana or Wyoming. Some of those kinds of things, I guess there's families that maybe they identify with that. It probably just goes so much against what we believe at our core that it's not something that settles well.
And I mean, just as a mom of a current seventh grader, I can't, it's just hard for me to see how I would shape my son into some pointy thing. And it's just things like, he just won the geography bee at his school, right? So, but he learned all that from playing Roblox. It's not like we decided he's going to be like this geography whiz. He was interested in it. He played a game. He learned it that way, and then that developed a talent. Like that was completely organic on his part. I don't know where anything is. So, and just I think if you are always pushing, you leave. There's no room to do that kind of stuff. There's no room to just to try things and be like, hey, I really like this, or hey, I really hate this, and just, we don't want to interrupt that normal process of development.
Yeah. And I would say this too, like there are a lot of really good counselors out there. Like the profession has grown like crazy and there are a lot of really good ones. So I don't think that anybody listening to this should be able to compromise. I'll say this. Sometimes people say to me, how do you judge whether or not you're successful? Sometimes people say that. And I have a straight answer for that. I say, at the end, when everything is done, are the parents happy that they hired me? Is the kid happy that they worked with me? And I happy that I worked with the family? If we don't go 3 for 3, then it's not a success.
Right.
So that's how I feel. And so I feel like if you take my 3 things that I shared, which was not you're comfortable with their knowledge, and whether that's knowledge of your schools, knowledge of the region, knowledge of your kids, college major or their own background, and are you philosophically aligned in chemistry? I feel like you can go 3 for 3 in that. Like you don't have to say 2 out of 3 ain't bad on this one.
No. And I would add for me.
See, I pulled out an old song on you there. Surprise you, Lisa.
I won't sing it though, for everyone's sake. For me, like I would also add the goal that I want the student to feel really good about themselves at the end of the process. Like I just had a meeting with a student and she did great on her, her results. She punched a little bit above her weight. Honestly, I think it was because her essays were really unique. But I could just see the confidence just brimming out of her. She was smiling. She looked so happy. That's everything to me. Is it if the kid feels like they've grown and they feel good about themselves as a result of what they've done.
Yeah, that's actually so important. This is an example of something that, like, we have this all the time. Let's say we have a family and they know early decision is going to help their chances, but it's not in their budget. They feel like they need to see financial aid offers first before they can commit. We're going to tell them not to apply early decision. But if there's such a focus on, I need to be able to show that I got kids into these kinds of schools to prove then, well, I know counseling that happens like that. And not just independent. This can happen at independent schools as well, where people are under a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I had a very lengthy conversation in September with a college counselor at an independent school, and he was telling me how much pressure he is under from the board for the college list to have more prestigious names on it so that people can justify paying the amount of money that they're paying.
Right.
So that's something that can transcend, independent counselors. It can go to independent school or private school counselors. But yeah, that's a really good point. Like someone who holistically looks at your kid's well-being. And I think you'll see that if you really delve. You'll see it by their approach. How much of it is like meeting your kid where they're at and focusing on what's in their best interest versus like talking, like here's what we can do to get you into these type of schools. I would run away from that stuff.
Right.
I know I'm partly reflecting my bias, and I do understand people coming from international backgrounds. Like there's a tremendous emphasis on rankings in those cultures. But still, even if you're going to gravitate to that, do it in a way where you're selecting something that's in your kid's best interest.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Cool. Lisa, we need to do more of these.
I know. And I really hope that Lisa and her student find the right person to help them. And, I hope it all goes really well for that family.
Yeah. And hopefully, Lisa, you got, a tip or two out of this that you can apply, and hopefully others as well. So thank you for the great question. By the way, Lisa, you need to select one of the 4 Princeton Review books because I got 100 of them to give away. There's one on the new digital SAT. There's the new Best 391 college book.
Ooh, that's a good one. I love that book. You should get that
there's
one.
one on essays that kick apps. Essays that kick apps, which is really clever. I love that name. Mm-hmm. And there's a 4th one. I think it's just overall about college admissions. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So just reach out. You can just email me at mark@schoolmatch4u.com, or you can leave a message on SpeakPipe. Either way, speakpipe.com/YCBK with your address, whichever is easier for you. And we want to get you your book. So thanks, Lisa.
Well, thank you.
Hint to you others. Send in your questions. You get a prize. I feel like what's that guy? The price is right. Come on down.
Yeah, come on down.
Showing our age again there, Lisa.
I know. It's unavoidable at this point, I think.
Yeah. All our references are like to the 70s or 80s.
I know.
It's bad.
It's just going to get worse from here on out, Mark, too.
I know. Especially when I don't watch movies or pop culture.
True that.
All right. See you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Friends, Lisa and I recorded this segment almost a month ago, and I've been thinking about Lisa, our question asker, Lisa's question. So here's some of my thoughts. How do you pick a doctor? About 7 years ago, I had a torn rotator cuff on my shoulder, and it was brutal. I mean, I couldn't throw a tennis ball with my left hand. I couldn't even hold the steering wheel with my left hand. So I reached out to Dave. You guys know Dave, co-host, my best friend other than my brother Norm, and asked him for advice before I had surgery. And Dave said to me, make sure you select a doctor who's done a lot of torn rotator cuff repair surgeries. So knowledge is important for a doctor, but so is philosophy. When you have a torn rotator cuff, now I'm no expert here, okay? This is what I've learned, so hopefully I'm getting it right. A doctor can do multiple things. They can do an open tendon repair. They can do an arthroscopic tendon repair. They can do a tendon transfer, or they can do a shoulder replacement. So your alignment with your doctor's philosophy is important. Some doctors want to put you under the knife very quickly. Others are more in favor of various approaches to rehab or natural treatments. You want a doctor that lines up with your philosophy. If you're asking me who my 3 favorite doctors I've ever had are, I'd say my current doctor, who's in Peachtree City, Georgia. The one I had when I first moved here, who was in the Camp Creek section of Atlanta, but the wait was just so long to see him because he was so popular. I had to switch to my current doc. And I had a great doctor, like 28 years ago now. Trying to think, we moved from West Philadelphia, Mount Airy section in 1997, and I had a great doctor when we lived there. He was a Central High alum, and we used to talk about education a lot and other really interesting things. So what made those three so special? Well, first of all, there was trust, but that's part of chemistry, right? Trust, chemistry. They were knowledgeable. I agreed with their philosophy and their approach. And once again, the chemistry was there. One more example. When we moved here in 2009 from Westchester, Pennsylvania, we were looking for a realtor. And I was referred to someone, and I vetted them, and I thought they were very knowledgeable, no problem on their knowledge. They knew the market really well. But then she started making disparaging comments about some, ethnic groups on our fifth call. And I just didn't agree with her philosophy, so I let her go. And we ended up having a great realtor who checked all three boxes. Knowledge of the area, we were buying a home, similar philosophy about staying in budget, and valued what we valued in a home and location, and great chemistry. We were in this segment almost 40 minutes, which is something we hardly ever do. But I believe if you use the knowledge, philosophy, and chemistry alignment test, and of course, part of chemistry is trust and likability with your student, in the case of college counseling, and with you, both of you. But that's going to help you make a lot of wise decisions in a lot of areas. And this would apply to selecting a dentist, a doctor, a realtor, an attorney, a financial planner, an accountant, a babysitter, a guitar teacher, a math tutor, or a college coach. Do your homework and make sure you're at peace. The one other thing that I wish that I'd have said a little bit more in the conversation with Lisa is don't bite off more than you can chew financially. Make sure you stay within budget. Because if you pay for a private college coach, this isn't the only expense that you're going to incur when it comes to college. There's a good chance you're going to be paying for test prep. You may spend thousands on hotel, airfare, rent-a-car, and restaurants for multiple family members. You'll certainly have application fees. And right now, you may be paying for a private or independent school. And who knows, your student may want to go to grad school, law school, business school, med school. You may want to help them out so they're not so much in debt. And then on top of that, you might have multiple siblings. And then we haven't even got into the cost of college. So make sure that you stay within your budget. But that's part of the match on philosophy.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, in part 2 of my interview with Jonathan Hughes and Julie Shields-Rutyna, Jonathan talks about how you can use gift cards, a gifting page, and an email link to set up payments for a 529 plan. Julie talks about the tax benefits of a 529 plan. Julie talks about the state tax deductions and the state tax credits. Jonathan talks about how the new Secure Act 2.0 makes 529s even better now, and he gives the history of how 529s have gotten better every year by helping with K-12 tuition and even apprenticeships. Julie tells us what qualified expenses are. Julie talks about the things that a 529 does not cover. Julie talks about what happens if someone doesn't have a social security number. Julie talks about whether someone can be the owner if they are not a relative. Jonathan talks about what the process is of getting the 529 money to the college. Julie answers the question, can a 529 be used for personal and miscellaneous expenses? And finally, Julie talks about what the safeguards are in place to protect fraud. Listen and enjoy. So, Jonathan, can gift cards be used?
Yes. So there's a number of ways that other people than the parents can contribute to an account. So MEFA actually just launched a gift of college, a U-Fund branded gift of college card. But this is something that's available at CVS's in Massachusetts. And there's a general gift of college card as well that you can purchase and give as a gift. when I opened up my U Fund account for my nephew, it was a gift for his christening, and it was great to be able to do that. But you do need some information in that circumstance. Like I had to call his mom, my sister, and ask, "What's his social security number? What do you do?" And sort of get all that information. So it can be a little bit awkward to give as a gift. So that's when the card is actually really useful. You don't have to have all that info, and you can show up with a tangible gift. So that's great. You can also just write a check. I had an aunt who would give me a check for $25 every time she saw me for my son's U Fund account. And it was really easy because our program manager has this tool, has this capability. I imagine many do, of mobile check deposits, right? So you can just basically take a picture of that check if you have the app on your phone and just gift it right in, right? So it's really easy to do that, or you can send a check in with the account number. Perfectly fine to do that. And then finally, the other way that you can actually kind of solicit sort of gifts from family and friends, if you own a 529 account, and this is specific to ours, but I imagine, again, there are others that have this capability, you can set up a gifting page. You can decorate the page with a picture of the beneficiary, name, when they're going into college, set up a link and email that link out to family and friends, and they can gift money directly in. So one of the great things about it is that it's very easy for other people to gift money in to a 529 account. And that's something that we like to stress because, college is or can be very expensive. We all know it. And it's great to save, but parents don't have to take that burden on all by themselves. So yeah, there's a lot of ways that people can gift money into a 529 account.
So I know, Julie, one of the big reasons 529s are popular are the tax benefits. Talk to us about what those tax benefits are.
Yeah. So the first two are federal benefits. So, for example, once you open an account and you start saving, hopefully, depending on the investments and all of that, hopefully the account starts to grow. And as it grows, normally when you have earnings in an account, then you have to pay taxes on those earnings each year when you file your taxes. But in a 529, you don't do that. So if the account is growing and you're earning interest, that you're just earning it and you're not having to pay taxes. So that's sort of deferring taxes all the way along. And let's say it's for a lot of years, 18 years. Then when you decide to take the money out and use it to pay for college and the related expenses, as long as you are using it to pay for this wide range of qualified educational expenses that will go through, then you never pay taxes on all of that money that was earned, all of the interest that was earned over those hopefully many years. You will never pay taxes on it because it was in the 529 and it's used for a qualified expense. So that's fabulous. That really puts it ahead of when that question you asked me a little earlier, puts that ahead of many other types of accounts. And then another a little bit newer tax benefit is that many states, I think it's about 30, have tax benefits also at the state level, either a state tax deduction or a tax credit for putting money into a 529 plan. So you can also many times take advantage of a state tax deduction or credit by saving in one of the state savings plans. Most of those plans require you to be in your own state's plan to take advantage of those state tax deductions and credits, but not all.
So when I think of it, I'm sort of almost in my mind thinking of two different vehicles out there, the Roth IRA and the HSA, health savings account, right? So like the Roth IRA, if you're not getting the tax deduction for, let's say, for your state, it seems like it would be similar because there you do get the deferred interest and the tax-free distributions. But with the HSA, they call it like the triple benefit one, right? You get the tax deduction up front and the deferred interest and the tax-free distributions. Is that fair, that assessment?
Yes, yeah. So in other words, it has some of the same benefits, but not exactly of the HSA.
Right, because for the 30 states that give you the tax deduction, that's a state-based deduction,
Right,
where the HSA, the health savings account, would be a federal one.
right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
And is the HSA a pre-tax dollar as well, or is it not? Because 529s are not pre-tax, right? The contributions are post-tax.
So you get the deduction on your federal that you
For the
similar,
HSA.
yeah, for the HSA.
Oh, okay.
And the growth, and you can pull it out tax free,
I
which
see.
is
Okay.
why it's kind of pretty awesome.
That seems to be
Yeah.
extra.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, let's talk about the new Secure Act 2.0, which just went in either 2023 or 2024, one of those. That's made 529s even better. What do you want to say about this update to 529s that wasn't in effect 2 to 3 years ago?
I guess what I'll say first is to back it up, even because I mentioned in the answer to the first question, the trend that we've been seeing, right, towards greater expansion. And so Julie just did a great job of mentioning how it grows tax deferred, right? So when the 529s were first created and the law was signed in, that's all it was, right? Was that you put money in, the interest or the value grows tax deferred, but it was taxed when you pulled the funds out to use for college. Then, after a few years, the distributions were free from taxes as long as they were used for qualified educational expenses. So that's the first sort of expansion. The next expansion is those tax cuts. Essentially, that tax benefit was made permanent because it was sort of temporary to begin with, and then the uses were expanded to include, the qualified expenses were not just higher education expenses anymore, but they were said to include up to $10,000 you could withdraw for K through 12 tuition yearly, up to $10,000 for apprenticeship costs yearly, and a one-time $10,000 distribution to pay student loans. So that was another big expansion. And then finally, the one that you just asked about, the most recent expansion, the Secure 2.0 Act, which provided the opportunity to move funds in from a 529 to roll them over into a retirement IRA account.
Friends, I made a mistake a few weeks ago. Hillary said a number that was too high in terms of how much you can give to a Roth IRA if you're converting your 529 to a Roth IRA in a question that we had. And Hillary caught the error right away, but I forgot to delete it when I was editing. So just to set the record straight, the max you can give per year for a Roth IRA for a student from a 529 is $10,000, and the lifetime limit of benefits is $35,000 per student.
And so there are a few stipulations with that. And essentially, and this is really great for people because one of the barriers that we've seen in trying to get folks to sort of sign up for a 529 is a lot of people are worried, well, what happens if my child doesn't end up going to college or doesn't end up using the 529s? Because then, if you have to take that money out, you lose that tax benefit. So it's great to be able to say, well, if that happens, you can roll these funds over into a retirement IRA so it can enjoy that sort of decades-long growth in an IRA. So there are some sort of stipulations with that. So the 529 account must have been open for at least 15 years before you roll that over. You can roll over a certain amount per year, which is whatever the IRA contribution limit is. And then the beneficiary has to be the same person as the owner of the IRA. So obviously, it's for the student. You're going to want to roll those funds over into the IRA for the student. And then any money converted to the Roth IRA can't exceed the lifetime conversion limit, which is currently $35,000. But it's a really great expansion yet again, and a great message for people to open an account and say, even if you can't use this the way it's intended, there's a way to greatly benefit your beneficiary.
Yeah, they've improved it a lot. And I forget the name of the act, whatever it was that went through in 2017, but that $10,000 per K-12, that's like per student per year.
Hmm.
So both my kids went to independent schools, so there was a lot of excitement when that passed. So I think adding that K-12 benefit and the Roth option is really making it very robust.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm, candidly, I might be doing the same thing myself. I'm kind of looking. I have a sixth grader now, and might be headed off to another school. And I said, well, I have the 529 funds I might be able to use. So, yeah, very grateful to have that.
Now, you guys have mentioned qualified expenses a few times. Let our listeners know what qualified expenses are.
Yeah, so tuition and fees, room and board, books, supplies, any kind of required equipment. The most common one, I guess, would be a computer or, other fees that are associated with a certain program. And then we've moved into the 10,000 per year K through 12 expenses. We also have $10,000 one time to pay off student loan monies. But that could be, say, the parent owned the account. They could pay off student loans, 10,000 for one student and their siblings. So that's an expanded nice benefit as well. Also, for doing apprenticeships, I guess it's registered is the way to think about it. Apprenticeships is another benefit, and now the Roth IRA. I think I didn't forget any there, but as you say, it just keeps expanding and opening up better and better.
So that list was pretty robust. What is not covered through the 529 that could be a college expense?
Yeah, things like for some reason travel is just on there as a no. That hasn't been pushed. Cell phone, say joining a fitness club, or what was the last one? Insurance is another one.
But still, it does cover most of your non-billable expenses. Books,
Yeah.
supplies, and even a computer even could be used.
Yes.
That's pretty good. So what if someone doesn't have a social security number?
Yeah, that is okay. We get that question a lot. A couple of other numbers that can be used are an ITN number or an EIN number. Those are acceptable. And another thing we just always share at that point is if a parent maybe would prefer not to be the owner and have a grandparent or a sibling, which would be like an aunt or an uncle of the student, they can also be the owner, open the account, and have the student as the beneficiary.
Could someone be the owner if they weren't a relative, like just a family friend?
Yes. I used to use the plumber as an example. Yep. The tricky thing there, and that's fine, that works, is, as John said right at the beginning, the owner has the control. So, even in deciding, when a parent is deciding, do I want to open this account or do I want to have my parents open this, the grandparents, one of the considerations always is, who do you want? Sometimes there's a ton of trust between family members, and maybe in certain circumstances there's less. So that, I think, should be taken into consideration, just knowing that the owner has total control.
So, Jonathan, how does somebody actually use the savings for a qualified educational expense? Like, what's the mechanics, the process of getting the money from the account to, if it's a billable expense, to the institution. If it's a non-billable expense, I guess it would be going to yourself. So how does that work?
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty easy. You contact the program manager, as Julie's mentioned, and they can send the funds out. They might send out a check, or it might be electronic, but it can go, as you said, either to you or to the institution. It's just that if it goes to you, you want to be able to show, if just in case, you were audited, that you paid a qualified educational expense with this. So if you're getting it and you're paying, let's say, dorm or housing or meal plan, whatever it might be, that you keep your records, even if it's off-campus housing, as long as that's part of that cost of attendance, you can do that. Just make sure you keep those records. So just contact the program manager and have those funds sent out either to you or to the institution. And it should be that easy.
Now, personal miscellaneous costs are included in cost of attendance. Are they off the record? I mean, are they ineligible? Like, do they fall into the category like insurance and cell phone and travel?
Good question. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, it's funny how they say required expenses. So it doesn't quite line up with the financial aid personal expenses, right?
Mhm.
I think to be, this is going to be between the account owner and the IRS, back and forth about qualified expenses. And so I think to be safe, keeping it to those required expenses like a computer, a lab fee, and we listed so many, keeping it to that is probably the safest way to be able to say that this was required.
Are there safeguards in place, like particularly for the non-billable expenses that aren't going to the bursar's office? What's to keep someone from saying, program manager, hey, I want 5,000, for books and supplies, but they really don't need that much for books and supplies. So they're in effect taking it and using it so they can go grab some pizzas and go to concerts. Like, are there safeguards in place that sort of keep that from happening, or is it only an issue if you were to be audited?
Yes, it definitely is only an issue if you're audited, but we do tell people to keep all your receipts as you keep other tax receipts, so that let's say you did spend a lot of money on books because you bought all new books or something versus trying some used ones. If you have your receipts in the file, then I think that is your backup with the IRS for books, as long as you have those receipts.
So is it just kind of kept open-ended like that, or are there sort of guidelines at all, like books should not exceed 2,000 or something like that, or is it just sort of left at the discretion that somebody won't abuse it?
The one area that there is some guidance, I guess, is that let's say a student is in off-campus housing. Usually the college will have a budget for students who are on campus and a budget for students who are off campus, and they'll have an estimated amount of what the cost of that is. And that's actually to help families, right, choose housing that falls within that budget and all of that. So that can serve as the guideline, say, for off-campus housing, as this is an amount that the school recognizes is a good estimate of an off-campus housing. So I guess they can keep their financial aid offers with the budget in it, and that also helps.
Friends, this concludes this part of my interview with Jonathan and Julie. Hope you join us next week for the next part.
And now it's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right, Susan. I know Susan loves QFLs, and I love.
I do.
Yeah, they're your favorites, and I love doing QFLs with you. So we're gonna play this question from Lara from our old neck of the woods. Your neck of the woods, Philly suburbs,
Delco.
Yeah, and then we'll let you go where you want to go with this one, Susan.
Hi, YCBK team. It's Lara from the Philly suburbs again. Actually from Delco, since Mark and Julia wondered. I have another question for you, and this time it's about test scores. I was listening to an older episode of the podcast, and Mark mentioned something about how some schools where submitting a test score that's much higher than the middle 50% might not be a good idea. So I'm just wondering if there's any information about that. Is it ever a bad idea to submit really good test scores? If your score is so out of the middle 50% range, so high, will the school not think you're a serious applicant and deny you? Just curious what you found or what you think about this. Thanks as always. And also just want to say thank you, Mark, for sharing your personal thoughts after the election. It was really helpful to just hear how you were feeling, and it made me feel less alone. So thanks.
Take it away.
So this is such an ironic question, don't you think, Mark? It's like, basically, can you be overqualified? If you're too qualified, is it held against you? So I jump to say no
Yeah. Most of the time.
most of the time,
Yeah.
but the burden on a very highly qualified student, and in Laura's question, she's talking about someone who scores in the top 25 percentile of the scoring range. When you look at the range of the middle 50%, 25% are over, 25% are under, and the median is in the middle. But first of all, someone has to be in the top 25% of a college's profile. And I think what Laura is saying is, does the college assume you're not going to yield if they admit you? Well, I don't believe anybody is overqualified for any college, right? I think challenge is what we make it, and students can kind of make their own adventure. But that said, a very highly qualified student, the burden of proof is on them to show that they are a serious applicant, and this isn't just a super duper safety school or notches in the gun, or my father's an alum and he made me apply like I did to my children because I wanted their dad to be proud. But the first thing a family has to do is understand if a college considers demonstrated interest in its evaluation process. And that question is answered in the common data set, as we often say, question C7, bottom of the chart, level of applicant's interest. If the answer to that is it is considered, then any student has to show that they are properly motivated to apply to that college and that they are a good fit for what that college has to offer. So whether your score is top 25% or you're not even submitting because it's below, it's at or below the 25th, percentile on the bottom, you still have the same burden of proof for a college that cares. Now, there are some colleges that demonstrated interest is not factored, although a well-researched application shines. There's always a way in an application where the student's genuine interest, sense of their match with that institution, academically and personally, elevates that application or doesn't elevate that application. So never in a million years would a college say, scores are above the 75th percentile. That's a problem. But if a well-qualified student does not show demonstrated interest, and it's obvious through the common data set that that's an evaluative factor, then welcome to the waiting list.
Susan, most of the time I'm always thinking of things I can add. I don't have very much I can add. I came into this with 3 points I wanted to make. You made all three. You did.
That's hilarious.
My first point I wanted to make was most of the time that's not the case. You do not have to worry about that happening. However, to the extent that you have got to have a higher level of engagement.
Yep.
And then not all schools even look at that. So looking at the schools that are looking at your engagement, which can be public or private, tends to be private more than public, but the trend is for public to do it more and more. I'm definitely seeing a rise of that. I guess one thing I can add, Susan talked about section C7 of the common data set as a place to go for that. There are gradations in there. So they can say considered, which I would take very seriously. They can say important, which I would take very seriously. Or they can say, like American University, very important.
Very important.
And you better take that seriously. But all of them, if anything, one thing I tell my students is, if anything, I find that schools are conservative there. So it's almost like if they say considered important. If they say important, considered it very important. Not everybody is equally as transparent on demonstrated interest.
And to be honest, I totally understand why. I'm somebody who takes pride in educating families I work with and how this process works. But every year I have at least a couple families that want to go right back to school a second time within like 6 months or 9 months after their first visit because they think they're building up demonstrated interest points. Now, I'm not talking about going back to an admitted student visit program, which I always recommend, even if you know what school you're going to attend. I find those to be invaluable. I'm just talking about taking another visit before decisions are made within, 9 months or so of the one you previously had. And about once every 3 years, I have a family that wants to take 3 visits. This year, the school is University of Michigan. 3 years ago, it was Vanderbilt. And I'm not encouraging this, but just think if the college told them, we put a big emphasis on DI, demonstrated interest, or engagement, or whatever euphemism they choose to use. If a highly selective college does this, they are asking for their reps to get stalked by families who are going to want to take multiple visits. And just like in dating, if someone comes on too strong, they can be a nuisance. And the attempts to impress by stalking reps and sending multiple emails to the territory manager or multiple visits within a 12-month period, they ring more like desperation than they do anything to elevate your value.
So just have a high level of engagement, but look at it from the school standpoint. They don't want to lose all those kids. Those are some of the kids that they can get really excited about, especially
Absolutely.
if the top quartile, like you described, also corresponds to the whole rest of the application, the personal qualities, and if you would rate this kid overall there because you're seeing the enthusiasm from the teachers and everything. If all of that comes through, those are the kids that I remember when I interviewed, I think it was John Bockenstedt, and I was asking him, it was, when somebody is a super high flyer with a lack of engagement, does that kid get denied? And he was like, very rarely would that kid get denied because sometimes we just don't know. We are kind of playing God here,
Right.
assuming that they're not going to come. And oh my goodness, what if we make that assumption and then they really were going to come?
And then John Bockenstedt said something else. He shared a couple of examples, actually, both when he was at DePaul and Oregon State, when they admitted a kid who was way above their profile that they didn't expect to yield and wouldn't normally yield, and the student enrolled. So Bockenstedt said to me, you have to be very careful not assuming a kid won't come. So waitlist is often what's done, but not a denial, because with waitlist, it still gives you the opportunity, if you really want the student, to flip them to admit. And if the college decides they need the student, and if the student wants the college, you can still possibly yield that student.
You said it correctly. Most of the time, it's a wait list.
Yeah, to test the interest.
Test the interest. I shared this once before on the podcast, but I was working with a student 6 years ago. And I know it's 6 years ago because I just literally talked to her mom last week and she graduated.
Oh.
So this was when she was in the 11th grade. This is when I was at KIPP. Was a student who was at the Petty School. And she applied to Rhodes. I had recommended Rhodes for her, but she really wanted to go to Richmond. But Rhodes looked like it would have really been a good program if Richmond obviously is more competitive than Rhodes. And I commend Rhodes for this. They read the tea leaves. And they literally said in the letters, the first time I've seen this, Susan, they said, we are waitlisting you, not because we're not interested in you, but we're not sure if you're interested in us.
Wow.
And if we have misread it, let us know. And we'll see if we can do something about it. Some people might find that off-putting. I commend them for the transparency. The thing about it was they read it right, and she ended up EDing to Richmond and went to Richmond and just graduated. But so you do have to be careful. Now, Lara, I don't remember saying, so I'm scratching my head. You said, Mark, I think you said when you're in the top quarter, I don't want to misquote you, but you're not likely to get in. I certainly don't remember saying that. To the extent to which I would have said anything, it would have been this exact conversation that if you look like the kind of student that the school's not that likely to yield, then you have to have a higher level of engagement. And I'm just using engagement as a euphemism for demonstrated interest. It's
Right.
probably a better term anyway, because that's really what they're assessing, and affinity. And the other thing to keep in mind, some schools, you remember that guy at Haverford, admission officer, Susan? He would have been there right toward the end of your time. He was a black male. the very end of your time. I can't remember. He came to our fair. He was the most direct person I've ever heard. He would say, if you live within 150 miles of
Oh,
Happy
right.
College,
Right.
and you don't visit, you're not getting in, you know? And so he was just making it really clear. And a lot of schools will do this. Andy Strickler talked about this in
Swarthmore was the other
Yeah.
one that always did it.
Yeah.
But, to that point, what if you have been on a college campus a lot because it's not that far from where you live, or you had a sibling go there or a cousin, and that you didn't intersect with the admissions office? Let them know that.
Yes.
Communicate that and say, whoa, I'm not going to show up in your records, but
Yeah.
I just want you to know that I have been a visitor to your campus and have enjoyed, ... Just let them know.
I just had somebody ask me that. They said, I'm a little frustrated because I really want to visit this school and I can't get any tours. And I'm really big on, you can do a self-guided tour and interact with students a lot and totally feel like you got the pulse of the place.
I find the information sessions very helpful, and especially when they are very well done. But you can watch information sessions on YouTube. Tours to me are about capturing feel and interacting with students, faculty, administrators, and staff. They are not so much about knowledge, they're more about feel. And the knowledge that they're about is the custom knowledge of people's experience at the school that you can get from talking with students, faculty, alumni, others in the area. Knowledge is very important. I'm not downplaying knowledge, but you can just go to apply.com. That's APPILY, and you can get all the information you need on most colleges by doing a tour with them. And if that's a new term, you're like, where's this Apply come from? It was formerly known as UVisit, and then it was taken over and rebranded as Apply, which I found out at NACAC is a play off of happily. Kind of corny, but it is what it is.
And so I brought up that, to the family, and they said, but how's the office going to know I was there? And so
You're going to tell them.
Yeah, you're going to tell them.
You're going to reflect on that experience and what was it that pleased you.
Correct.
And has moved you down that pipeline toward applying.
Yeah. So great question, Lara. Hopefully we answered it for you. Lara, just so you know, for sending this in, you are going to get a book from Princeton Review, and they're going to mail it out to you. They're going to handle all of that. You're going to have a choice. You can pick their best 390 colleges. You can pick their book on the new digital SAT. You can pick their book on college admissions, or you can pick their book called Essays That Kicked Apps. So it's a creative name, right?
Yeah.
And so just send an email. Just send it to me, marketschoolmatch, number 4letteru.com. Put in the title, Princeton Review. And if you could put, if you can remember to put the episode this ran on, that would be helpful as well. But if not, you can just put your name. And we've got a whole system set up. We had to work out the kinks with the system because they're so nice to do this.
Lovely.
To send 100 books and then not just to pay for the books, but to handle the whole postage and handling. Because I know we tried to do that internally with stamps.com for a while, and it's quite an ordeal to take that on.
That's right.
The mail lady after a while said, "I'm not taking all this stuff. Go take it to the post office." So anyway.
And I know her.
But thank you very much, Lara, and keep sending in those questions.
Friends, on Monday's episode, I'm going to answer a question I get asked at least once a month. And it came in yesterday to me via an email. And that question is, when do you recommend, Stuck, that we start our college search? Now, I'm going to approach that from a lot of different angles. I think you're going to enjoy that conversation. Next, I'm going to teach you multiple ways to know if the colleges you are considering are financially stable. It's another question we get a lot. And then we'll have part 3 of my interview with Kathleen Delaski on her book, Who Needs College Anymore? Now, this is important. Kathleen's emphasis on who is not who, as in I'm being skeptical and sarcastic that anybody needs college, but rather who, as in which students actually do need college and which ones do not. Friends, I want to share a paraphrase of an email a podcast listener sent in to me today, actually. The listener was just giving me an update on their student search. And then he said, The way that I end every podcast is ingrained in his head, and it grounded them and informed their college search. So for you teachers, and teachers doesn't just mean you have to be in the classroom. All of us as parents are teachers, and you could be a basketball coach and you're a teacher. Of course, I pick basketball because that's my favorite sport other than track. Or piano, you're a piano teacher. Then you're a teacher. I want to read a quote to you from Napoleon Hill. And this is what Napoleon Hill said. The single most influential force that controls your attitudes, beliefs, capabilities, and emotions is repetition. Did you catch that? The single most influential force that controls your attitudes, beliefs, capabilities, and emotions is repetition. So I close with this. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's not where you go. It's what you do when you get there. It's what you do when you get out of there. That is what will determine your career trajectory. See you on Monday, friends.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Rouff, Dr. David Williams, Lynda Doepker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Lynda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcasts. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.